Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Hey, everyone.
Grab your favorite beverage. It's great to be back with you. Today, we're diving into something we've actually chewed on a bit before, but we're going way deeper this time.
Yeah, we are.
We're talking about, well, let's call them potential unexploded bombs out there in the world economy and, the global scene. Those big surprises nobody really sees coming.
Yes. The classic black swan events. Think of them as things that are practically impossible to predict. They hit you like a ton of bricks if they happen. And then afterwards, everyone goes, oh, yeah, obviously that was going to happen.
Right. Hindsight.
Exactly. By their nature, you can't know a black swan is coming. But looking at current trends and expert warnings, we can squint really hard and maybe spot where some really big risks might be hiding.
Exactly. And that's what we've been doing, sifting through various reports from international groups, financial research firms, news analysis, basically trying to connect the dots on some of the biggest potential shakeups we might see heading into 2025 and beyond.
We pulled out a few key areas that really jumped off the page.
Yeah, they did.
So today we're going to explore what these unforeseen risks might actually look like globally, then puzzle over a curious situation brewing right here in the U.S. job market, where there might be jobs, but maybe not enough people to do them. And finally, we'll take a look at the giant Chinese electric vehicle maker, BYD, and what might happen if they hit a rough patch.
All from an international angle, of course, giving you the pieces to think through it yourself.
Okay, let's kick this off. So, a black swan event, you explained it well. Imagine living your whole life and only ever seeing white swans. Then one day, boom, a black swan appears.
Totally changes your perspective.
Right. Massive, unexpected, and afterward, you can explain why it was possible, but you didn't predict that specific one would show up when it did.
And the reports we've seen suggest potential black swans, or at least major shocks, aren't just in one little corner of the world. They could pop up across different areas.
Yeah. Geopolitics feels like a big one right now. The potential for conflict escalations is definitely highlighted.
For sure. We've seen analysis talking about the Israel-Iran situation. The worry isn't just the conflict itself, but if it widens significantly, it could impact, say, the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, absolutely. That's where like 20% of the world's oil passes through. A major disruption there could mean crazy oil price spikes and a massive global market shock.
You'd feel that at the pump instantly.
Totally. And the Russia-Ukraine situation, while ongoing, still carries huge unpredictable risks. Escalation there could further mess up energy supplies for parts of the world or disrupt global food chains than grain exports from Ukraine.
Yeah, the food supply aspect is huge.
It is. And let's not forget the quiet, terrifying undercurrent of potential nuclear risk that still exists. These existing conflicts have pathways to become much larger, much faster, with really unpredictable global impacts.
Then you've got the global economy and trade, which is another area flagged for potential turbulence.
Right. The big one here is trade tensions. We're seeing discussions and reports about potential new U.S. tariff policies, maybe a 10% baseline tariff on all imports.
Wow, all imports?
Yeah, potentially with even higher rates, like maybe 30-something% for specific countries like China and Taiwan. There's apparently a deadline around July 8th for certain negotiations, which adds some near-term pressure.
Okay.
The insight from the analysis here is about what a widespread trade war could actually do. Reports suggest it could seriously shrink global trade volume.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. It might also push up prices for consumers. One estimate we saw said it could add over 2% to consumer costs, even if it brings in tariff revenue. And obviously, countries that rely heavily on selling stuff to others.
They can be in for a tough time. Yeah.
Definitely. Switching gears to potential market shocks, there are some interesting risks. The crypto market is still, well, volatile.
Understatement.
Right. And there's specific concern flagged around stablecoins. These are cryptocurrencies designed to keep a stable value, often by holding reserves. But if those reserves include a lot of short-term government debt, and there's a sudden panic or rush to cash out stablecoins, they might have to sell off that debt really quickly.
Oh, I see.
The worry is that could cause ripple effects in the traditional bond markets, where governments borrow money. It's kind of an unexpected connection, right?
It really is, and it shows how linked everything is.
Totally. And then slightly more futuristic, but potentially high impact, is the idea of AI-driven financial crashes.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
With algorithms making trading decisions in fractions of a second, if something goes wrong or a feedback loop starts, you could theoretically see markets drop incredibly fast before anyone even knows what's happening, like flash crashes on steroids.
Yikes.
Okay? And we can't ignore the big non-financial risks that still have massive economic consequences. Climate change is one, some reports call it a green swan, because it's not totally unpredictable like a black swan. We see it coming.
Right, it's unfolding.
But the scale and speed of its impacts can be hard to model, and they're significant and costly. And the potential for new pandemics. Even after COVID-19, the analysis suggests the world might still be quite vulnerable to another novel, easily spread bug.
Which could again shut down economies and disrupt life globally. Scary thought.
It is. So why should any of this big, complicated global stuff matter to you, sitting at home or driving your car?
Good question.
Because these big risks, if they happen, can reach into your everyday life. They can affect the price you pay for gas or groceries, the stability of your job, the performance of your investments.
But they create a lot of uncertainty that can slow down businesses, make people hesitant to spend, and just generally make things feel shaky.
Exactly. Okay, let's zoom in a bit from the global picture to a really curious puzzle that's popping up in the U.S. economy, specifically the job market as we look ahead into 2025.
Okay, what's the puzzle?
What's interesting here is how two potentially powerful forces seem to be working against each other. On one side, you have policies aimed at creating a lot more jobs.
Okay, good.
But on the other, you have policies that could seriously limit the number of people available to fill those jobs.
Ah, okay, a mismatch.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
On the job creation side, reports point to policies like tax cuts and efforts to reduce regulations, which are designed to encourage businesses to invest more.
Makes sense.
We saw analysis mentioning over $4 trillion in potential new investment that could really boost job growth, especially in areas like U.S. manufacturing.
That's a huge number.
It is. There's even a reference to past periods, like the 5 million jobs created after the 2017 tax cuts, suggesting this approach can really juice the economy. Recent job numbers show growth, too, like that 228,000 figure back in March of 2025, though it did dip a bit to 177,000 in May.
Okay, so the jobs might be getting created.
Right. But then you look at the labor supply side, and this is where potential changes in immigration policy come in. Analysis suggests that policies like widespread deportations, potentially ending programs like DACA.
That's deferred action for childhood arrivals, right?
Yeah. Correct. Affects young people brought here as kids, or really tightening up on work visas like H-1B visas, often used for skilled tech workers and doctors, or H-2A visas for temporary agricultural laborers, could significantly reduce the pool of available workers.
Okay, so fewer people coming in or allowed to work.
Some projections are pretty stark, suggesting potential negative net migration, meaning more people leave the U.S. than enter, perhaps by over 700,000 people in 2025 alone.
Wow.
This could mean the U.S. economy adds far fewer new jobs each month, maybe closer to 100,000 instead of the average 180,000 we've seen. Plus, let's not forget the demographic shift with a large chunk of the baby boomer generation heading into retirement.
Right, that's a big factor too. So the core insight for these reports is that you could have businesses that want to hire, they have the investment to grow.
But they simply can't find enough people, especially for certain jobs or in certain parts of the country.
Yeah, it's the jobs but nobody to do them scenario.
Oh.
And the analysis suggests this is a high possibility.
And it really impacts specific industries because they rely heavily on foreign-born workers. Take agriculture. Maybe 20% of workers are foreign-born.
20%.
Limit those H-2A visas, and who is going to pick the crops? That could mean wasted food and higher prices at the grocery store for you.
Yeah, you'd see that quickly.
Construction is another one, around 29% foreign-born. Fewer workers means projects like building roads, bridges, or even new houses could slow down.
Which drives up costs for everything and could make housing even less affordable.
Exactly. And healthcare. About 18% foreign-born. This is doctors and nurses on H-1B, but also crucial support staff. As the population gets older and needs more care, limiting this labor source could lead to real shortages and longer waits for medical help.
Manufacturing, tech, and even restaurants and hotels are also mentioned as being potentially impacted.
Yeah, hospitality too. So if companies can't find workers, what does that mean for the whole economy?
Right. What are the broader effects?
Productivity could slow down. Growth might stutter. Businesses might have to pay a lot more to attract the few workers available, which is great for those workers, but it increases costs for the companies, potentially making them less competitive.
Okay.
Some analysis paints a really concerning picture for the long term, projecting things like a significant drop in GDP. One estimate said 8%, and lower wages overall, maybe a 7% drop.
8% GDP drop. That's huge.
It is. Another estimate put the lifetime loss for a typical middle-class family at $58,000. It could also add to inflation because higher labor costs get passed on.
Wow. Okay, so potentially significant consequences.
Potentially, yes. Of course, it's worth mentioning that economists look at these different policies and how they interact, and they don't all agree on the final net impact. There's definitely a real debate happening about how it will all play out.
Right, it's complex. But again, connecting this back to you, the listener, this puzzle in the U.S. job market could mean higher prices for the things you buy, slower progress on fixing roads or building homes, maybe longer waits if you need healthcare.
And if you run a business, especially in those sectors, it could mean a constant struggle to find enough staff. It's a really complex situation with potential impacts on everyone's wallet and daily life.
Okay, let's swing the conversation back overseas again, this time focusing on China and their massive electric vehicle company, BYD. They've become a huge player globally.
Huge is right. The situation with BYD, from what reports are saying, isn't necessarily that they're about to go bankrupt tomorrow, but there are definite concerns flagged, particularly about their high debt levels. We saw a figure around $44 billion in net debt mentioned.
$44 billion, wow.
Yeah. And the immense pressure they're under from the really intense price war happening in the global EV market right now. Everyone's slashing prices to compete.
Yeah, that price war is brutal.
It really is. It was interesting to see that recent news about BYD actually taking legal action against some influencers who were spreading negative information about them.
Oh, okay.
That kind of move can suggest a company is feeling a bit sensitive about its financial perception.
Right, so this brings up a big question. If BYD did run into serious financial trouble, like truly teetering, would the Chinese government step in to bail them out?
The insight from the analysis is that there's a high possibility the government would intervene.
Okay, high possibility. Why?
And the reasoning is pretty clear. BYD isn't just any car company. It's a giant in an industry, electric vehicles, green energy, advanced tech that is incredibly strategically important for China's national goals.
Right. EVs are key for them.
Absolutely. They see it as key to their economic future and technological independence. And the Chinese government has shown before that it's willing to step in and rescue major companies if their failure could cause significant economic instability or hurt strategic goals. It's about maintaining control and preventing bigger problems.
Okay, so how might they rescue them? What would that look like?
The reports outline a few potential ways. It could be direct cash injections, providing cheap, low-interest loans, helping them restructure that big debt load so it's more manageable. Maybe even having state-owned companies buy up parts of BYD's business. They could also coordinate help from suppliers or increase subsidies to keep the company afloat. They have a lot of levers they could pull.
A whole toolkit. And if a rescue like that happens, who stands to benefit?
Good question. The analysis lists several groups. First off, BYD's hundreds of thousands of employees saving their jobs is a big deal for stability.
Definitely.
Shareholders and investors would likely see the stock price stabilize. Companies in BYD's supply chain that rely on their orders would be helped. People who already own BYD cars would still be able to get service and warranties.
Right. Consumer confidence matters.
It does. The wider China new energy vehicle industry would benefit by keeping a major player strong and competitive globally. And of course, the government itself benefits by achieving its strategic goals and showing it can manage potential crises.
Makes sense. Are there downsides to these kinds of rescues?
Yeah, absolutely. Government rescues aren't without controversy or potential downsides. There's the idea of moral hazard. If companies expect the government to bail them out, they might take riskier bets in the future.
True.
There's the sheer cost to the government, using taxpayer money, potentially. And it can cause international friction if other countries complain that this kind of state support gives BYD an unfair advantage globally.
Right. Trade implications again.
Exactly. And why does the situation with a Chinese car company matter to you, no matter where you are? Because the global electric vehicle market is super interconnected.
Yeah. How so?
Well, if a major player like BYD faces issues, it could impact how many EVs are available globally and what they cost. It could affect the worldwide supply chains for components that BYD either uses or produces. And honestly, the fortunes of a company that big can even have ripple effects on international financial markets.
It's a good reminder that these economic stories don't happen in a vacuum.
Not at all. So we've journeyed through potential black swans, hiding in plain sight risks, from geopolitical flare-ups that could hit your gas tank, to trade wars that could affect prices in stores, to market tremors, and even big environmental and health challenges.
Then we landed on that fascinating puzzle in the U.S. labor market policies that might boost job creation. clashing with policies, potentially limiting the workers available to fill them, creating real challenges for specific industries, and maybe slowing the whole economy.
Right. And finally, we touched on BYD, China's EV giant, and the strong likelihood the government would step in if they ran into trouble, and why that matters globally.
It really does highlight how totally interconnected everything is in the world today, doesn't it?
It really does.
A conflict across the ocean can truly affect your gas prices. A policy decided in Washington could impact who's available to pick the food on your plate or build the next road.
And the fate of a big company in China can send ripples through global markets. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty swirling around out there.
Absolutely. And as we said, these aren't definite predictions of disaster, just potential risks identified in reports based on current trends and analysis.
Exactly. The defining characteristic of a black swan is that it surprises you when it arrives.
So here's a thought to sip on. Considering all these interconnected risks and potential shocks we've talked about, how prepared do you think our systems, from big things like governments and global markets all the way down to local communities and even our own homes, truly are for something completely unexpected and high impact to happen?
That's a deep question.
Are we building resilience, or are we just kind of crossing our fingers and hoping for the best? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
All right, that wraps up this Sip and Talk. Hope you enjoyed our conversation about these potential global risks.
We always appreciate you hanging out with us.
Please do us a favor and make sure you subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss any future discussions.
And hey, while you're clicking around, seriously, check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel. He does some really fun stuff like great memes, cool music bits. He even does wine tasting reviews and travel vlogs.
Okay, sounds fun.
It's genuinely entertaining. Definitely worth a quick look.
Cool. Yeah, go give Micky's channel a look. For Sunny, I'm Joe.
And for Joe, I'm Sunny.
See you next time on Sip and Talk.